I will also be sending the slides out to everyone when this is over so that you can have the information and use any links that are in it as you move forward trying to figure out how you're going to do some alignment. And then I wanted to let you know about a couple of upcoming events that we have going on. We have the MTSU online ID drop-ins. To see when those are, just go to the calendar on the Stay on Course website, the faculty services section of the Stay on Course website. The next one is next Tuesday at 2 p.m. And then we have others through the end of July and through August that are 1 or 2 times a week. So if y'all have questions about instructional design, feel free to pop into those. Susan Meyer-Shirk has a Zoom opportunity coming up on the 29th. You should have gotten that announcement from the LT and ITC yesterday. So check that out if you have questions about Zoom. And then Carlos has a Panopto tips presentation coming up at the end of July. So make sure y'all check those out if those are things that you might have questions about. Okay, so heart and soul, aligning student learning outcomes to activities and assessment. So your activities, your assessments are the heart and soul of your class. It is what happens. It's what's important. It's where the learning takes place. It's where things occur. So what is it? Is it a lecture? Is it an article? Activities and assessments? How are you measuring the learning that should be occurring in your class? As a result of this workshop, you should be able to differentiate between goals, objectives, and outcomes. Consider activities and assessments in your course and what is being measured. And then compose student learning outcomes, or SLOs, that align with activities and assessments in your course. Well, there you go. So what are student learning outcomes? Anybody know what a student learning outcome is? I gave you a little clue, there's a graphic. Student learning outcomes are the measurable activities that occur within your course. It's the specific items that are for that day or that week, that module, that theme, that topic. It is the very specific and measurable and attainable activities that occur within your class. And how are these different from goals and objectives? So that little graphic, that is what makes sense to me. And you will see some literature out there that people flip outcomes and objectives, and sometimes course level objectives, I call them out, objectives are called outcomes, and activity level are called objectives. But for the purposes of this training, goals are program goals, your degree goals, institutional goals, very specific items that are for completion of your degree program. Those are your goals. Your objectives are the course learning objectives that are in your syllabus, that are the ones that are very specific, that at the end of that class, the student should be able to do, and then you list a few things that are the objectives of the course. They're the ones that are in the syllabus. They're the ones that are specific to that class. Outcomes are the ones that are at the very bottom of our inverted pyramid. They are the ones, again, that are very specific to that week, that activity, that assessment, that class, that specific thing. They are the ones that are the smallest in terms of like the broad scope of goals, but they're the ones that really are huge and make such a huge difference in our student learning and where they're going and how we're getting them there. So to back us up a little bit, right, backwards design, good job. I should get credit for that, right? Backwards design. So I don't know how many of you were able to attend Kevin's presentation last week, and I'm going to talk about it in just a second, but Kevin Crambiel had a presentation last week about backward design. So alignment of SLOs flows right in with backward design, and it's part of why the LT and ITC had Kevin go first, and then I'm doing this one, is so that you can see how things build and scaffold on each other. And that kind of goes with the goals and the objectives and the outcomes. You have to think about those things in that order to get to the point that your course makes sense to you and makes sense to your students. So backwards design, very simply, is beginning with the end in mind. So thinking about, where do I want to be at the end of this class? Not starting with, what do I want to do on day one? Starting with, where do I want to be on the very last day? It's a flip in mindset, and it's really about thinking, instead of, I'm going to do everything I can from the beginning to the end to cover everything before time runs out. I'm going to start at the beginning of the textbook, and I'm going to go through and hope I get to the end. I don't know if any of you in a class have ever tried to get to the end and then realized in the last couple of weeks of class that you had like this much of the textbook left, and weren't quite there yet. So I've done that. In the beginning, before I really understood some of these processes, that was really how I did it. Was I just sort of attacked it and went at it from the beginning to the end. And when I really learned more about this and started thinking about it more in terms of this, I was able to structure my classes, and I actually end up covering more content over a more realistic span of time. So what you should be thinking about with that is, what are the important topics for students to know? What are the key takeaways I want students to get in this course? So for just a second, kind of think about a class that you might be teaching now, or one that's coming up in the very near future. And what is the number one thing that you want to, at the end of that you want them to know? That number one thing. Kind of start thinking about what that might be. Make a little note to yourself. Maybe it's 2 or 3. But what are those things that are most important for your students to walk away with? My undergraduate degree is in history and middle school education. And so my example with that is it more important for students to know a specific date? Or is it more important for them to know what led to that event and what the outcomes of that event were and how those impact our daily life? So thinking about which one of those is more important to me helps me know what direction I want to make sure I'm going with the activities and assessments in my classes. So here's a little quick, Kevin had an hour-long presentation. I'm summing it up in 3 bullet points. I would encourage you to take a look. I think his video is going to be available soon on the stand. If not, you may be able to contact him, and he's going to love that I just told everybody that. But he discussed backwards design or understanding by design last week, and the 3 key steps, and these are some important steps to kind of think about. Identify your desired results, which is what I was just saying. What is the primary? What's the most important thing for you to be able to get out of this? Determine the acceptable evidence. So that is thinking about, how are you going to determine that the student actually did that activity? They learned that thing. They got that point. And then finally, it's what learning experiences are you going to have to get them to the place that they can do the assessment that leads to them showing you that they met that student learning outcome. So just a quick recap of course learning objectives. Just some things to think about with those. They are set by faculty or the department initially developing the course, and are approved by a curriculum committee or graduate studies, or depending on your level in the university, which one of those committees does it. But they're the ones that are approved. They're the ones that are in your syllabus. They're stated, and they're the ones you're not supposed to change because they were approved by the university. They're often vague in nature and not always measurable. I'm just gonna leave that little parentheses there. They're large concepts. Something like students should be able to critically think. Great, that's so helpful. What does that actually mean? What does that look like? How do we know if a student is able to critically think? So if we're thinking about where we are in those goals and objectives and outcomes, what are we doing in our outcomes to help our students get to the point that we're meeting that critically think objective. So why is SLO alignment important? I hope y'all like my little graphic. I think he's cute. Have students ever asked why they need to know something? Anybody ever had that happen? Feel free to use the little raise hand thing in your Zoom if that's ever happened to you, because I've had that happen. Or what is the point of this assignment? When will I ever use this in my real life? I feel like I get that one too. And why do we have so much busy work? Those questions usually come from students not fully being aware or understanding where that activity aligns with what it is that they're doing in the class. What is the purpose of this activity? What is it specifically leading to that's going to help me better understand the concepts, better understand what is in this course, and better apply it to my life after I finish this course or after I finish college? Where is its importance? And that is something that is more and more and more important as students, as new generations of students come in, and as we see older students. It's very important to adult and older students. Time is so important that they want to know that what they're doing has purpose for their activities, and they're not just doing something to do something. Really knowing how it connects and can help them later in life. So when you hear those questions from students, how do you feel? You don't have to share. I'm just asking you to self-reflect. How do you feel when students say that? And I can share a little bit about me. For me, when some of those things happen, I start to question a little bit about what it is that I'm doing in my class and the information that I'm conveying. But it also kind of hits me hard, because if I have them doing something, it's usually because I got excited about the activity and I want to do it because I think it's really cool. And I didn't do a very good job of explaining it. Or it's something that I am very passionate about, and I know that it's something that I want them to know about and understand and learn and apply in their lives, but I haven't done a good job of portraying that. So something that I'm passionate about, they don't see value in. And that can kind of hit us at our core, because this is something we do because we love it, right? We clearly don't do it for like money and recognition and prizes. So we do this because we love it. And we want others to have that same joy it is that we do. So thinking about a course, program, institutional accreditation, students demonstrating the ability to meet outcomes is a primary focus. I am sure that some of you have gone through some sort of departmental accreditation or program accreditation or something recently that they have asked you about students meeting those outcomes and students meeting those objectives, and you showing that they have done that. How are you doing that? Are you doing that at the end where you're like, oh, this class did this and I got to show how they did this? Or are you intentionally, as you're developing your class, making sure that those accreditation goals, those accreditation outcomes, those objectives for your course and those outcomes for your class, that they're all aligning for you and they're making sense, so that at the end of the course or the end of the semester or the end of the program, you can legitimately say, this was the accreditation outcome that had to be met, and this is the course we met it in, and this is how we met it. If you think about those things going into your class, it actually makes it easier to do some accreditation things at the end. So not only does it help with student understanding and student response and engagement and purpose of activities, it also helps you with some of those other things that you have to do, whether that be part of your faculty activity report at the end of the semester, or something to do with department-wide accreditation. I'm sure that our SACS accreditation team at the university would love if we could give them some awesome resources and information about how we're meeting our departmental goals with some pretty easy outcomes information. So I want to give you an example of a student learning outcome and how this might look in a class. Because I don't want to just talk about like in the abstract. It's important that you get this. So a little piece of information about me. I actually like teaching research methods. So everybody's now judging me because you all are having flashbacks to your research methods classes. I actually like teaching research methods. I think it's really important to meet students where they are with research and help them gain an understanding of it so that it's not quite so overwhelming. So I tend to teach the ones that are the broad concepts research methods classes. So thinking about validity and reliability, I am certain that you all know every single validity and reliability test right now. If I ask you to list them, you could list every single one, right? Right? No, I couldn't. I teach it and I couldn't do it. So I use this as my example because for me, what's important with that is for students to know where to find the list of them and the information and how to communicate that information and determine which test applies. So it's about application and analysis. It's not so much about remembering, and we'll talk about that just a little bit more in the future. But for me, my goal with this, and this is not an actual outcome from one of my classes, it's one I made up, but it's similar to this. An outcome, the student should be able to apply a test and defend the selection for a research study. So we're applying and we're defending. The activity, review resources describing the types of tests available as well as how and why each is applied. Which assessment aligns with the outcome? Assessment 1, submit a written explanation of all common tests utilizing course and outside resources. So write a piece of paper that lists them all out. Or 2, analyze one of the research plans provided, obviously examples will be provided, and submit your selection and justification for the test or tests you selected utilizing course and outside resources to defend your position. Which one of those meets my outcome? So when you're thinking about that, if my outcome specifically talks about them applying and defending, and my assessment says, write some busy work that you remember this, I'm not actually doing an assessment that looks at how they apply and defend their selection. I need them to actually do an assessment where they look at all the different types of tests and then make a determination from a case study, a research proposal, something that I've provided, that they determine which test needs to be used and why. And that is where they're explaining it to me. So in assessment number 2, they're not having to memorize all the different types, but they are having to look at, okay, here are all my types. How do I determine which one is best? And how do I apply it to this section? And how do I justify why I chose this one? And so I don't know that I can figure that out, like how that's different, but it's because what I specifically said in my outcome is the thing that I want them to be able to do. I don't want memory and recall. I want to know that they can tell me why this is the one that they want to do. So that is an alignment of here's my outcome, here's the activity that is necessary to lead to the assessment. So those are all aligned. They all play in the same straight little line. So it's about measurable action. SLOs are measurable. Side note on that, understanding is not a measurable verb. Just gonna throw that out there. Keep that in the back of your mind somewhere. But SLOs are measurable. So looking for words that are action verbs, things that you can actually say, do this and it leads to this, an actionable item that is measurable. The verb is the assessment. If the SLO states a student will be able to compare and contrast, but the assessment is a multiple choice quiz, are we measuring, comparing, and contrasting? So there are a lot of different processes out there and information about taxonomies and tons of educational resources. In full disclosure, Bloom's is not actually my favorite, but it is the one that is makes the most sense to apply for this situation. And I'm about to click to a little link here. It's one of the resources that I sent you earlier is actually this document, but I'll click on it here in a second. And it's the digital Blooms, and the reason that instructional designers in MTSU Online send that one out is because we just like the verbs, and they're fun and they're current. And they say things like vlogging. I mean, who doesn't want to use that in a sentence? So thinking about your taxonomy and thinking about digital Blooms. So I'm going to click on this one and let it open up for y'all to see it. So one of the things that it's important to think about is think about your course level. Are you a 1,000 level class? Are you a 3,000 level class? Are you a 7,000 level class? And thinking about your course and your course level and where you might need to think about in terms of the scale of your verb usage and which ones make the most sense. For a first semester 1,000 level class, you may not want to start with creating. Now, by the end of the semester, you may have an activity that gets all the way to creating, but at the beginning, you may be doing a little bit more remembering and understanding, and some of the more lower order thinking skills. That's what LOTS is, and higher order is the HOTS. So what you're going to want to do in your course is, as you're thinking about it, if you're in your HOTS, then you're starting with your lower LOTS. And thinking about how those activities might best fit. One of the things to consider with this is some things might be implied or even understood that they're a part of the higher order thinking. So if we think back on my information from earlier, my activity, and what we were looking at in terms of that, I specifically said that remembering the test was not a requirement for my outcome. You don't have to remember all the names, but you have to have at least had some sort of recall to know what is validity and what is reliability. And you have to have a general scope from your initial review of those activities to know how to apply and analyze and evaluate. So I'm not going to put in my activities or in my outcome that they need to recall something, because to me that's understood and implied, because they have to do some of that in order to get to the analyze and evaluate levels. So thinking about those things in a graduate level course, you may not need recall or define. I don't need you to define the test in order to actually apply it to what you're doing, because you had to go and read the definition to get to that point. So I hope that makes some sense as to what that is. But I do encourage y'all to use this chart, especially if you are getting stuck, because there's some pretty awesome ones on there. Okay, so before we go into our activity, I want to take a second and see what's going on in the chat, see if y'all have any questions, any things that you need me to go back over before we go into the activity, because I don't want to send you into the activity and not be real sure what's going on. I agree, matching is challenging. Y'all are right. So on the one that says memorization of class material is not important, I'm not implying that memorization is not of value in every class or in everything. I was saying that that specific one, for me, memorizing those test terms and reliability and validity test terms is not the primary focus. I don't need that to be memorized for the students to be able to apply and utilize it in their research class. So just kind of thinking about that, it's not I hope that makes a little bit more sense with that. Oh, Tara said the same thing. So there we go. Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and move on to our activity because I want to give y'all plenty of time to do this. Okay. You will need your syllabus and the resources that I sent you this morning. So thinking about the course, select one objective from the course. One. So looking at your syllabus, pick one learning objective from the course. And then using that chart, you will complete that chart. Now you'll see on that chart that there are the 6 learning objectives in there. I put them all in there, all 6 levels. Your objectives may not fit all 6 levels. Every class is not going to have all 6. You may have more, 2 or 3 of one and none of one. So that is, there's a reason it's a Word document, and that's so you can edit that stuff in there. But it's getting you to think about, as you're thinking about your class and the information in your class and where you're going with your class, if at the end you're looking and everything is in remembering and you're a doctoral level class, you may need to revisit that. So pick one objective and then go ahead and think about what you do in your class right now to meet that objective. So think about what are the activities that you do, what assessments do you have right now in that activity. Just take a second. Okay, so now that you've done a little bit of that, does it align? When you're looking at it, does the activity and assessment that you do currently in your class, does it help you meet that objective? Is there a direct alignment? Is what you're doing measuring what that outcome is? Are you ready? We're going to do some breakout groups. So those of you that have never done Zoom breakout groups, here we go. I hope you're ready. We'll get those going here in just a second. You will be able to select your breakout group. So I'm going to pause my recording for a second because in breakout groups, it kind of does something with that. So I'm going to pause my recording and I'm actually going to stop my screen share. Breakout rooms. So we're going to just resume recording and then go ahead and discuss amongst yourselves, discuss with each other. And I'm going to try to see if I can figure out why our breakout rooms didn't work, but openly discuss. I know there's a lot of people in here, but feel free to raise your hand. We'll call on you as we can. What is an activity or assessment that you are trying to use, but you're not sure how to make that align in your class? Anybody got one? I see a lot of information going on in the chat about infographics. I love me some infographics. Has anybody had an opportunity to use infographics in their class as an example of students having an activity or assessment that helped you meet a learning outcome, a stated learning outcome in a more creative way? Yes, Janet, I know you have. Would you like to share your experience, Janet?
If I can unmute this, I had Kim come and speak to a class in the spring because I had never heard of an infographic before, but I realized that I had used them a lot. I teach nutrition. So what I did in the spring, and I'm probably going to do this forever, but I picked, like when we're talking about a topic like vitamin C. I go out and I find an infographic that has already been created. And then the students have to go in and critique that. They have to find out if the information in that infographic is correct or not. And then, they have to go in and identify the resources that justify it is correct or it's not correct. And then another thing, many infographics have who created it. So that's another big thing. And then also I gave my students blindly an assignment that they had to create an infographic. And I just did it totally blindly. Kim came and she shared with the students how to use, was it Canva?
Yeah.
Yeah. And most of the students did use that. And I had some that were so professionally done. And the students actually had a choice of doing a PowerPoint presentation. And they were going to have to present it orally in class in April. But again, of course, they didn't get to do that. But most of them did the infographic and they love it. So it turned out to be a wonderful experience. And I will use it in the future.
And can you share with us what your outcomes and objectives were that had to do with that activity? Do you feel comfortable doing that?
I muted myself. I really didn't have any objectives or outcomes, but I developed them for the future. In fact, in the fall, I teach Advanced Nutrition 1, which we cover the carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And I think I'm going to start out with the end and let the students know at the end of the class, they're going to have to create an infographic, and that can be on a carbohydrate, protein, or fat. And then they have to go in the class, we talk about controversial things, misinformation in the public. So they're going to have to narrow it down and pick one topic that they will focus on in that infographic. Again, I haven't developed that assignment yet, but again, that's what I plan on doing. And throughout the semester, again, I plan to share with them infographics. In fact, on test, they have a test question, and part of that is they have to critique the infographic. We do it in class, but then they also have to critique it on a test.
That's fantastic. Are infographics something that get used a lot in nutrition?
Oh, a lot, constantly, a lot. And I think that I've actually been using them. I've never created them, but I've been probably using them for 10 years and did not realize what I was doing.
That's great. So that is an activity. If we think back to the things that I was talking about even earlier in this, that we're thinking about the end in mind, and we're thinking about how we are giving students purpose for the activities and assessments that they're doing within the class. If you are going out to the field of nutrition, and there's a lot of others that this would apply to, part of what you're going to probably end up doing is creating resources for your clients or for the agency that you work with that convey information about nutritional components, about information about healthy living, different information like that. So the students in the class, not only are they learning about the specifics of vitamins or carbohydrates or proteins or things like that, but they're also learning that skill set that when they graduate, they will have this knowledge and they'll be able to use that in their professional career. That's now something that they can put into their portfolio. They can share that when they go on interviews. So if someone says, why are you having me do this? You can now specifically say, this is something you're going to actually do in your career. It has benefit to the long term of what you're going to be doing in your life once you graduate. So it's got that impact that you're looking for in terms of showing a student why it matters and how that works.
And another thing, in the nutrition and health related, medical related journals, now they also want a graphical abstract. So, so that a student can, and we look at a lot of the graphical abstracts for the articles that have those. And again, that's another thing that the students will be able to use, is to create that graphical abstract.
Absolutely. Anybody else have an example? There's a couple going on in the chat. I see the Mythbusters activity. and giving students incorrect scenarios and then having them go out and research why it's incorrect and how to correct it. Are there any others out there that anyone would like to share that y'all do? Okay. I can give y'all another example. I worked with a professor years ago in an online course, and it was a survey class, and was having a pretty hard time with the students engaging the information at a deeper level. So we went and found access to the Oregon Trail, the game. Told y'all it's Throwback Thursday. I'm throwing it back. Oregon Trail, the game, is available on the Internet Archive for free. And the way that the outcomes and activities were set up, that it had to do with manifest destiny, but it also, it more specifically had to do with looking at the game itself and the social norming and the cultural awareness in the game, because it's not a very culturally aware game. So you got to address that from the beginning. And the students taking that information and what they gained from playing the game and the activities in the game, as well as the resources in their class, and applying some of those historical concepts to today, and writing a reflection about where they see some of those same concepts in today's world. How can you apply it to today? Where do you see some of those specific things? Because the game actually does address things like socioeconomic status. It does address manifest destiny. It does address a lot of other cultural awareness things, and dealing with the concept of why would you leave everything behind to go to a place that you've never been? What is it that you're searching for? And the students really got into it and really got excited about it. And it was the best responses that he got through the class every semester, and keeps using it and has updated over the years, but keeps using it and uses that as an opportunity for students to see. And for him, he says it applies back to that, the critical thinking objectives for the class, and the applying the concepts from historical events to current day life that were part of the overall course learning objectives. So he found an interesting and unique way to do that. And everything that you do in a class doesn't have to be an experiential learning opportunity, though I love them and we should use them. But you know, looking at those things and seeing how they align, really consciously thinking about, is the activity that I'm doing, or the assessment that I'm doing, is it actually aligned with that outcome? Is it actually aligned with that objective? Am I actually the thing that I'm saying I want to measure? And so going back to the one that's the compare and contrast, are they comparing and contrasting in that activity? If it's a multiple choice test, probably not comparing and contrasting. Now you can easily change that to a written response, that they give you a written response that they compare and contrast the information from a question or a case study or information that's been given. It's just thinking about, is the actual assessment getting back to what it is I say I want them to be able to do at the end? And is the activity that I am doing, or the activity that I'm providing, or the activity I'm having them do, leading them to be able to successfully complete that assessment? And that's the alignment key. That's the alignment point. So does anybody have questions on any of that? All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. So what you missed, because our breakouts didn't work, was this awesome artwork that I was going to show y'all, because sharing is caring. So I really appreciate those of you that shared. And I know there's some stuff going on in the chat as well. So thank you for sharing. And I encourage you to take the opportunity to sit down with your colleagues, either in your department or across departments, and talk about some of those activities that they're doing, some of the things that they have going on within their courses that you might be able to adapt to really find ways for students to engage and see that purpose in the activity and see that purpose in the assessment and how they can move forward with it. Right, and who doesn't love the Care Bears? So there it is. So conclusion and questions. Did we do it? The student learning outcomes for this activity were differentiate between goals, objectives, and outcomes. Consider activities and assessments in your course and what is being measured. And then compose student learning outcomes that align with activities and assessments in your course. So I think we did all those things. We did one outcome and assessment. And sorry about the breakouts. Hopefully I can figure out what it did and we can try this again sometime. But I feel like we might have met those. So I tried to provide information and activities during this presentation that showed that alignment of the activities that I had are directly related to the outcomes that I have in here. And I would, if I ask you to, you could turn in that document to me and I could even probably assess it and let you know how you did. I'm not, you can send it to me, we can talk about it, but I'm not going to give you a grade. Nobody wants a grade today. So, so what additional questions do y'all have? Feel free to open it up in the chat, or if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and let's chat away. We've probably got another 5 minutes or so. So any questions that y'all have?
I'll go ahead and ask a question. I think this was very helpful, and it's always a good review because oftentimes we're teaching classes that whose objectives, course objectives were written a while ago and really do need to be updated, and that's one thing that that showed me. But the other thing is that I think I'm always, particularly now as we're changing our teaching format, looking for resources for creative activities, and certainly you gave some really good ones, like particularly the infographics today. Are there any other activities, websites, or things that you would suggest that we look at as we're planning our courses and our activities that have, you know, something creative besides read the chapter, answer the questions, you know, that kind of business?
Right. Actually, yes. One of those resources, we have an MTSU Online Instructional Designer resources page that we have been adding some things to as a result of the COVID, actually, but we keep adding. We didn't stop when the pivot happened. We were just getting started. So I will make sure to add that to the information when I send it out. You can get to it from the Stay on Course website.
Okay.
It is also available on the MTSU Online Faculty Services website under resources. But it has a lot of information about places you can go and things that you can go look at. And then there's some additional assessment pieces in there about different types of assessments. And if you happen to find one that you would like to share, we are happy to share that and put that on our resource page for others as well. But one of the things that Tara and I do, this probably says a lot about us as people, we love working with faculty to help you come up with fun and creative activities and assessments for your classes. So if you have a topic that you're trying to think of something fun to do, let us know. We love doing that. We know what that says about us. It's okay. We're fine. We own it. But it's a lot of fun. Tara, do you have any specific examples that you'd like to share?
A little, maybe a few. Sorry, I've been typing in, I've been listening and kind of typing in the chat, so I'm a little behind on what you said.
You're fine.
But, are you talking about engaging activities? Is this where we are? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're good. Right, I put you on the spot, didn't I?
Well, it kind of depends also too on the purpose of the activity, but you could do, instead of, say, for example, if they have key terms you want them to learn, you could create, there's ways to create free crossword puzzles that students could then, maybe you give them the definition and, or you give them the word or something like that. They have to look up the definition to be able to fill in the crossword puzzle. And there's ways there, like I said, there's places to do those for free there where they're able to download a completed PDF of that crossword puzzle to submit it if memorization of key terms is important. I also talked to somebody earlier this week about putting small Easter eggs in a class. If you want students, I think this was for an art class, to learn artists, but you don't want to give them all the information, you could put little photos of different types of art within the class and then challenge them to find them all and identify who created them. And you could also do, someone mentioned role playing. You could do, role playing is a great thing to do on a discussion board, as long as you're very clear about the expectations for each role. Students often really get into that. Or doing some sort of web quest. Maybe you want them to learn about the history of something. And you can challenge them to go on a web quest to find that information themselves and then share that information with others, have the peers share on the discussion board what they found. Those are just a couple of things that come to the top of my head.
Those are awesome. Thank you. Someone mentioned in the chat too about mind maps or concept maps. Those are really fantastic too for multi-layered or concepts that might be a little bit difficult to get how different things connect, for them to go and create their own concept map of this is how this process works. And that gives you an opportunity to also see if they are gathering how those different steps connect. Because sometimes for really difficult concepts, that's the hard part, is understanding what is at what level and what connects where. And so if you do something like that and they submit that for assessment, you will actually know whether or not it's making sense to them and know how to redirect some of your learning activities for the next course or for the next session, either for everyone or for that person individually. It'll give you a better idea of where they are. Formative and summative. You know, thinking about learning as you go and thinking about testing in the end. So what types of assessments? And that's part of it too. There's all kinds of stuff in this chat. I'm gonna have to save this chat and send that out to y'all as well. There's great stuff in there. Yeah. Any other questions? We got a couple minutes left if anybody has any other questions. One thing I will tell you, one of the, and I know everything going to different delivery for the fall is a little overwhelming and a little bit challenging. But one of the ways to think about that is there's a whole lot of things that you can do in online that you might not have been able to do in a face-to-face class. So embracing that concept and owning that, it's kind of fun. Allow yourself to be creative with it. And don't feel limited by it. And if you do get stuck, we are here to help you with that. We can help you with that. The people in the LT and ITC can help you with that. The people in the FITSI can help you with that. We are here to support you during this process. So if you're feeling stuck and you have an idea, but you're not really sure how to make it work, let us know and we can walk you through that process.
Hey, Kim, I wanted to say thanks to you and Tara. And I will mention to everyone that Kevin Cranbuell did the backward design workshop last week. That video is not available yet. However, we have an archive video on the Stay on Course faculty website, the LTN ITC website. Kevin has done that workshop for us several times. So if you're interested, you can check that out. When the new one is ready, we'll let you know about that too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think that's about it. So I want to thank all of you for being here today. And we can stay in for a little bit if anybody has some questions. But I really appreciate y'all being here today. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and have fun aligning your SLOs. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you again, Kim.
Absolutely. I'm happy.
It's really
Happy to
very good. Yeah.